Hello again. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, and today we're going to be interviewing the CEO and founder of Petrichor.io and Cycle.io. This is a container as a service company. So one of the cool, new, sexy products that you probably heard about are these things called Linux containers. They are a form of virtualization, and they will probably change how computing is done. There's this whole microservices architecture that is absolutely amazing. So we're going to talk with the CEO, we're going to talk with the founder, talk about why containers as a service is an important thing, how they plan to deploy containers as a service, why you should care about it, and then the other simple things such as their company is out of Toledo, Ohio. So why Toledo, Ohio? How do you create a company in Toledo, Ohio? And those type of things. So I'm very happy for this interview today. But of course, before I get to the interview, I can't forget the sponsors, because the sponsors, they're the ones that help pay for things like this. Because believe me when I say, the CPM on things like interviews for founders of containers as a service companies is not exactly something you're going to want to write home about. So let's talk about the sponsors for a minute, and then we will jump into the interview. So we have Veeam, Veeam, free backup for PCs, VMs, and Linux, all at Veeam.com. Dev Mountain is a 12-week web development, iOS, and UX design bootcamp intended to get you a full-time job in the industry. Learn to code at devmountain.com. INE specializes in network training with hands-on labs, on-site bootcamps, and a focus on delivering the best in online networking courses. INE.com. Schoolie Mitchell's purpose is to increase clients' profit by reducing telecom cost using software and processes at no risk. We only share savings. SchoolieMitchell.com. Plixer. With Scrutinizer and flow data, users can determine what traffic is on the network, who is originating the traffic, and who is receiving it. Plixer.com. And finally, Gilware Data Recovery and Backup Solutions. Gilware's partner programs help computer repair and IT professionals make money by offering data recovery and backup services to their customers. Gilware.com. As I say, I do not care if you subscribe, do not care if you thumb up, do not care if you thumb down, do not care if you leave a comment, but if you click on those sponsor links below, that would be very beneficial, because again, this is what helps pay the bills. CPM on this kind of stuff. Yeah, not so much. So with that, let us jump into the interview, because I think it was a really good interview, and I think it will teach you a lot about the modern world of technology and the types of things that you need to be thinking about. So we're here with Jake Warner. So he's the CEO of Petrichor.io and Cycle.io, and we're going to talk about his startup. He's doing containers as a service, which sounds like a very interesting idea.
Yeah, containers as a service, big new market, really exciting. Lots happening here.
Okay. So the first thing is, so yesterday we had a conversation, just so like with my viewers understand. There's Petrichor.io and Cycle.io. Are these are two different companies, or these brands, or when somebody wants to deal with your company, what are they actually dealing with?
So Petrichor is more just kind of the holding company,
Okay.
having the mentality of, as company continues to grow. I mean, it'll be a decent amount of time before we start any other companies, but just lots of ideas and wanted to make sure that ahead of time I plan for that. But right now, all the focus is actually on Cycle.
Okay.
And Cycle is the container as a service.
Cycle.
Thing.
So when you grow, does that mean? I guess that's like the new hip thing to do. Is like every product going to get its own company
Yes.
versus really? Oh, okay.
And the goal, I mean, of course, we don't want to start too many companies too quickly to the point of where, we lose focus or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the goal with that way, or the goal by doing it that way would be that, as Cycle continues to grow and if we end up buying another company alongside of that, it's easy to put it under, one umbrella. Or if we end up wanting to buy it, or sorry, to sell a company,
Yeah.
we can do that fairly quickly.
That's
Or
okay.
not fairly quickly, but through without selling the entire thing. Petrichor can still be its own entity.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Is that a new thing? Is that what all the cool startups are doing now?
I don't know, but it was just one of those things that like it was just appealing to me. And
Okay.
just like, are you familiar with what the word petrichor means?
No. No.
So it's actually the scent of rain.
Huh. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
just one of those like really unique words. It has nothing to do with anything.
Oh, okay.
But so I thought, hey, that's a great name for a company.
Hey, there you go for a real word that nobody else uses. Okay, that works.
Exactly.
So if we're talking about container as a service, then what exactly are we talking about as a container? So container is a form of virtualization, but it's not the virtualization most people understand, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so most people, when they hear containers, they think of Docker.
Yeah.
And just a container at its lowest at its simplest form is just a root file system that has your applications, dependencies, and the things or the other libraries and things that are required to run those applications.
Yeah.
And the big benefits that you get with a container is that you don't have a full-blown operating system running inside of it.
Okay.
And sometimes you can have these containers that are incredibly lightweight. Like Cycle.io is actually the entire container running Cycle.io is 8 MB. It's
Okay.
literally just a Golang binary.
Okay.
So the fact that it's this much smaller format. One, of course, it's much more portable, easier to move around. But since it only has the things that are required for it to run,
Yeah.
the attack surface is much lower. You don't have all these extra libraries that just come with the operating system that you have no idea what they're going to provide, or what vulnerabilities they may have.
Yeah.
And so we literally only have one process in that container for Cycle.io, and so it just runs incredibly efficient and very portable, and again, less attack surface.
That's interesting. So with these containers, I know it's normally they say LXC, so Linux containers. Are there Windows containers now, or is it still all in the Linux world?
So LXC was big with Ubuntu,
Okay. Yeah.
and now we're moving towards kind of this mashup called it's just taking all these different uh, OS functional or these OS components and piecing them together. You have the namespaces, you have C groups, things like that.
Yeah.
And what we use for Cycle, and this is quite a bit different than many of our competitors, not all but most, is I'm actually involved in runC, which is the raw container runtime
Huh, okay.
built by OCI,
Yeah.
which is the Open Container Initiative. And so we are one of the first, probably two or three platforms to actually implement OCI. And most people don't even know it, or sorry,
Yeah.
not OCI, runC.
Run C.
Uh,
Okay.
but most people don't know it. But like even the latest version of Docker
Yeah.
doesn't Docker itself doesn't actually have own or Docker itself doesn't actually have any code to run containers. It just implements runC as well now.
Huh.
And so
Okay.
where there's a lot of our competitors out there these days that are really just wrappers around Docker.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Cycle kind of took the did it the hard way,
Yeah.
and everything is implemented on runC. So we run your containers at the lowest level possible. We don't have any virtual machines in our stack whatsoever. We build namespaces and all the different C groups and everything. And then we put user namespacing around the containers so that they're more secure and things like that.
Yeah.
But that way we run it at the simplest. We try to get rid of the most moving parts.
Okay. So
That's what
so run C is then what runs the containers.
exactly, and that's all it does.
Okay.
It was so as people were starting, as these container technologies started to kind of take hold and grow,
Yeah.
the community kind of came together and was like, "Hey, we really just want a single way to start these containers. That way, all the containers, no matter how they're built, will all run the exact same way." Um,
Oh. S-
and so that
s-
way, platform providers can build their own features and everything around the containers, which is like
yeah.
what Cycle has done, but the container is still a container.
Oh, interesting. So is this kind of like with the virtualization in the Linux world with Zen, where basically everybody uses XEN Zen, and then they just create their own management for that essentially?
Exactly.
Exactly. Oh, okay. So even Docker then just uses so everybody just uses run C.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so
Hmm.
runC was actually started by Docker. Like they took their internal stuff and then kind of forked it over,
Yeah.
and then the OCI community kind of came together, and now you have people from Red Hat there. We actually were at DockerCon in Seattle,
Okay.
and after DockerCon there was an OCI meeting, and so it was great to be in this room with with people from Google and Red Hat and
Yeah.
Docker and CoreOS and all these other container companies.
Yeah.
Uh, and just really being involved in that community has been great. And just knowing that Slate was one of the few platforms that have actually implemented runC rather
Huh.
than just being a wrapper around Docker is one of those things that it's really exciting. We get to build features that you know people that are using Docker as their base
Yeah.
necessarily do because they're limited to what Docker provides them to do.
So that's interesting. So then I'm surprised you'd be at DockerCon then, aren't you then are they then technically a competitor of Docker?
Uh, in some ways, yes, but
Uh,
so with Docker, so people can still use Docker with Cycle.
okay.
And so so right now the goal of Cycle is production ready containers.
Okay.
Um, meaning, so people will still, in most cases, will still use Docker locally on their computers. They'll build their containers, test them, things like that. But then when they're actually ready, they'll upload them to Cycle at that point. And so they can just export that Docker container directly to Cycle, and then Cycle will run it at that point. And so right now, most of Cycle's features are geared around, being production ready
Yeah.
versus a lot of the other competitors that are more the kind of development workflow.
Okay.
And we have some features in the pipeline to start going that direction as well.
Yeah.
But we from all the research and kind of surveying we did before as we were building the platform, we realized that, okay, there's a lot of development tools out here, but no one makes it super, super easy to just get containers online. And that's where Cycle fits in. So yeah, Docker is a competitor in some ways,
Yeah.
but I also look at them as complementary. It's great to have them there.
So, so then what's it? Because I was looking at Docker before this, because I was looking at your prices, because again, my channel is all about business and money. So I look at your prices. Your prices are pretty reasonable, almost you would think a little low. And then Docker is like ridiculously expensive. So
Mhm.
what's the difference in function? Like why is Cycle different than Docker if you're going to be paying for it?
Yeah, so I mean, so there's two different ways. There are two different. I mean, probably more at this point. But with Docker, you have Docker Enterprise, right?
Yeah.
And that requires you installing something called like Docker Data Center on your infrastructure, and you have to manage it, and you have to manage all the infrastructure. And then there's so much overhead to that. But then of course they have the support contracts and everything.
Yeah.
But where Cycle's major target is, right now these individual developers, these startups, these people that are creating new applications, the same people that would go after like AWS or Google Compute or a container engine or
Yeah.
DigitalOcean.
Okay.
Uh, and then as we build up the platform, being able to extend that so that we can go after those larger companies when we have more of a reputation behind our company.
Oh, okay.
Um, but
So then, is there anybody out there that does what you do? Like, because yeah, you talk about cheap virtualization. There's Linode and there's DigitalOcean and all that. Is there anybody that does like commodity container as a service the way you do?
I mean, there are a few,
Okay.
but the big thing, so like if you take a look at, let's say Joyent's Triton
Okay.
service,
Yeah.
that they kind of do it the same way, but from what I understand, they're still the Docker wrapper,
Huh.
and they
Yeah.
really get integrated into that development workflow.
Okay.
And so like so the biggest thing about Cycle is in how it is, like I said earlier, specifically the production ready, is
Yeah.
most of our features are geared around that. So when people start containers on Cycle, we automatically communicate with Let's Encrypt and automatically get SSL certificates for all
Okay.
their containers, so they don't have to worry about that.
Hmm.
We have hosted DNS, and then we automatically build private networks between environments where if you were using Docker, you'd have to deploy Docker swarms for every single different application.
Hmm.
So now it's
Interesting. Okay.
literally just clicking, I'm going to create a new environment, and now you just upload containers into that environment, and they're all over an encrypted network and everything. They can all communicate. We take care of all of that for you.
Oh, okay.
So really, people that would Cycle be very appealing for is those individuals that they don't really want to care about networking. They don't want to care about anything. They want to upload their container and get it online within a matter of minutes. And
Oh,
Cycle
okay.
does that really, really well.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. And then
There's very little customization.
okay. Then with your what's with your infrastructure, is that everybody does like, is it AWS or are you using dedicated servers? Are you actually using your own server infrastructure for this?
Yeah, so we use our own dedicated infrastructure,
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
that is actually through. So I guess a little bit about me is before I started Petrichor, I was a senior engineer
Yeah.
at SingleHop,
Okay.
and they're an infrastructure company. So I helped automate their data centers,
Okay.
and so now we use their infrastructure and very familiar with it, and it works
Yeah.
out well because rather than taking something like AWS and now we're throwing, we already have virtualization in the stack, and now we're throwing containers on top of that, and
Yeah.
so many people just keep adding more moving wheels to their infrastructure,
Yeah.
and so we made it as simple as possible. We went down right to the bare metal, and
Okay.
Cycle runs on that. So everything that any containers that you run on Cycle
Yeah.
will run on bare metal.
Okay. And then I guess that's one of the questions. So since we're doing containers as a service, and so putting all your containers, one of the problems you get into with any kind of shared services is you actually don't know how many resources you get. Like the whole argument with GoDaddy about 8 years ago, where they dropped like 5,000 websites onto a single box.
Yeah.
Like, how do they know if somebody starts using you for the containers? How do they know what resources that they're actually going to get, or how do they know that the performance is going to be worth a darn?
So right now, I mean, the resources they get would just be determined by which plan they choose for their instance.
Okay.
And then, I mean, other than that, like this is just the problem you have with everyone is you kind of have to trust them and not overcommit. And so, we don't.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
I take that back. We do, but only 10%. Most people will do about 60 to 70%. I
Hmm.
mean, your hardware gets super saturated.
Yeah,
And we only overcommit about 10%, but then Cycle's also smart enough to know that if those nodes automatically get kind of hogged down,
yeah,
we'll do live migrations to other nodes.
yeah.
So the platform is resilient against that. But just since we know that not 100% of our users are going to use 100% of the resources at the same time,
Yeah.
it would be bad not to. But on the other hand, containers, since you don't have to pre-allocate too much in
Yeah.
terms of like the RAM is you set maximums, not necessarily, I'm going to set aside all this RAM ahead of time.
Yeah.
And even with storage, without getting into the details, it's all we don't have to we don't have to pre-allocate any sizes.
Okay.
And that allows us to have much, much, much better utilization of the host,
Okay.
especially because these containers don't have these operating systems that are just taking up so much CPU usage.
Hmm.
I mean, if you have, a container running in Nginx and you're not getting any hits to your website,
Yeah.
as long as you don't have another application of that container using that resources, that container will literally be doing nothing. It won't be wasting any CPU.
Hmm. Ah, I see. I see. That's interesting. Okay. And then I see. So in order to work with the with your container, so you can code for it. So it says right now you can code in JSON in order to be able to deal with your infrastructure.
Yeah, so our API is JSON based.
Yeah, so is there a reason for JSON? Is that what all the container people use, or?
JSON is just, I think it's the most portable format in terms of, I mean, almost everyone has a RESTful API.
Okay.
Now, we have a couple of other features down the pipeline that allow you to do actual just web sockets so that you can have kind of bidirectional communication in where you don't have to constantly pull data. You
Yeah,
can
okay.
actually have it be, push notifications to you and things like that. That way, people would be able to build infrastructure systems and integrate with Cycleware rather than sitting there and checking in, with Cycle every X amount of, every X amount of seconds.
Yeah.
They can just open that socket and just Cycle say, when Cycle does something that requires an event, it'll just call out to you and say, hey, we did this. You should do whatever action you want to do.
Yeah.
So kind of like hooks, but they'd be live uh, in terms of like just actually using sockets. So
Is
that's
that
one of the
is
features.
that what you need Node.js for? Because I see there's Go and Node.js that'll be online in November.
Yeah, so those are just clients that we're going to build for people
Okay.
to interact with our API.
Yeah.
I mean, so you can upload your containers via our portal, and
Okay.
once you upload them via the portal, it doesn't matter what language you use.
Okay.
You can have any application, you can write
Yeah.
any language,
Yeah.
but you actually use the API since we use Golang for all of our stuff internally,
Yeah.
and most container technologies do actually.
Use Go.
Like yeah, Docker is written in Go,
Hmm.
runc is written in Go, libcontainer, which is the foundation of runc, is written in Go.
Okay.
Almost any container technology is written in Go. So we just figured, that's the natural first client we should release. And then Node.js is just because that's so crazy popular that it'd be weird not to. And we expect to add more clients to that list as we go. But starting with those two is just a natural too.
Well then, so why did you start initially with JSON? Why not start with Go then?
Well, so JSON is just the way of interfacing. The
Okay.
Golang client is going to use JSON to interact with the API.
Ah, I see. I see. Okay.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so JSON is just the data format between whatever you're doing and connecting to us. Now, like I said, that's just like, so the API would be used to like start this container, stop this container, things like that. In terms of actually building your container or
Yeah.
writing your container or whatever, I mean, that's a completely different process.
Ah, I see. Okay.
So you can use any language for that.
Okay. And then to spin up, because I've heard, I mean, that's the big thing I've heard with containers is the cool idea is that you can spin them up so quickly. So you
Hmm.
can have a script, spin up the container, run the script in the container, and then kill the container. So you don't have to worry about viruses and patch management and all that crap.
Hmm.
So looking at your website, I got a little confused because it says
Okay.
once there's an image up there, you can create multiple instances of that image within seconds. But then
Hmm.
it says there's a 1.6 minute build time. So what's the difference between those two things?
So with a container image, if we actually need to build the image, meaning so that I guess that's one of the features of Cycle 2 is you
Yeah.
can actually connect Cycle to a Git repository, and then
Okay.
we'll pull that repo into our infrastructure and do the build for you. So that build is taking your initial script and turning it
Yeah.
into a container format, like
Okay.
a traditional virtual machine image. Now,
Yeah.
once we have that image built, we can
Hmm.
deploy that thousands of times. I mean, and that's the part that starts really quickly because now we have that image built. That only happens once,
Oh, I
and
see.
then like so you have your image. It might be a WordPress image or whatever.
Yeah.
We've built it, and then you say, I want to deploy 10 of these around the globe, and I want to have GeoDNS for them so that traffic is routed geographically. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
When you click start, now we move those images to the nodes that they should be on,
Huh.
and then once they move there, start time for a container is less than a second.
Really? Damn.
Mhm.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Um, so then, yeah, so with the Git repository, and then I saw you had something with Docker Hub. What exactly is Docker Hub then?
So Docker Hub is a repository of pre-built images,
Okay.
and so if you're using and so it works really well into the flow that Cycle has.
Yeah.
So if you build, if you're building a container locally on your machine, rather than uploading it to a Git repo and then having us do the build, you might just say, yeah, I'll just do the build myself.
Okay.
And so you can do run a Docker build command and then push it up to Docker Hub, and that way when we pull it over into our infrastructure, it's already a built container. We're just literally pulling the image over to our infrastructure at that point.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
rather than us doing the build,
Yeah.
the build's already happened. We're just pulling it.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's cool.
And Docker Hub is one of those like it's easier to share those images with other developers than
Yeah.
a Git repo. You have to do the build yourself every time.
So since I deal with a lot of noobs here, and some noobs are going to be like, "Yay, containers!" Since these are basically servers you're spinning up, is there a way to know if what you're pulling from Docker Hub is actually something that you should be pulling? Isn't full of God knows what? Are there any like certified or, you
I
know?
mean, there are official images on Docker Hub.
Okay, yeah,
And when you go to dockerhub.com or whatever, there's just like an official tag.
yeah,
But most people will use it for building their own images. And of course, at that point, they'll know exactly what they want.
okay,
But for the people that haven't, yeah, there's a bunch of official ones. I believe there's even an official WordPress for people that would want to
okay.
deploy WordPress.
So do you offer that? Because I think like that's like DigitalOcean offers like pre-configured droplets. I guess that's what they call them. Do you offer any of that, or do you plan to offer any of that?
Yeah, we do not right now. That
Okay.
is one of the goals by the end of 27 or 2016.
No, okay. That's good.
Is kind of a wizard-based functionality where even if you don't know how to build containers, you'll be able to log into the portal and say, "Yeah, I want WordPress. I don't know how to build a WordPress or a WordPress container, but I want WordPress," and we'll
Yeah.
deploy it within a matter of a minute or two.
Okay. And then so for new people, if they're interested in all this with Linux containers, how do you learn? Is there some kind of certification track? Is there a favorite book that you have? Like somebody says, "Yay, containers are the future." Like, okay, what's next?
Honestly, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just one of those things that I dived into, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I'm the kind of person that I just learn while I'm doing things, and so no, I didn't necessarily read any books or go and get any certifications. I don't even know if there are certifications for containers yet.
Huh,
There
okay.
might be.
There might.
I have no idea.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, really just, I mean, it sounds weird because like we mentioned before, how Docker is in some ways a competitor, but also not.
Yeah.
But like, we look at them as complementary for most of the things that they do.
Hmm.
So really, just install Docker on your computer, play around with it, and when you're ready to take your stuff live and scaled around the globe,
Yeah.
Cycle makes that really really easy because you
Okay.
don't have to manage any other infrastructure.
So then what does your client actually look like? Because a lot of these shared services, email services or even web hosting service, it's pretty easy to understand what your client looks like. Even if the client doesn't know they should buy it yet, you can
Mhm.
push them down. Like when you're talking about like containers, like who do you imagine? Like who is your prime demographic? Who is like I want to own that demographic? Like
Yeah, so that is one of the weirdest parts about containers is the fact that like right now it's a lot of individual developers and the initial startups,
yeah.
but in a matter of years, this is the way all developers are going to write their code because it's super easy to port between different providers, things like that. So I mean, that being the big answer of literally everyone, but in
Okay.
terms of the people that we're going after, initially it'll be a lot of these individual developers, these people that are going to be going to DigitalOcean,
Hmm.
people that kind of the application developers that like they're building things that are they're building things that have high volume, high traffic,
Yeah.
but they also don't want to manage their own infrastructure for it.
Huh.
Containers are really, really good at transactional data.
Okay.
In terms of where they lack right now is big data, and not necessarily in like processing big data, but in the aspects of storing big data. Because containers are just they're made to be rather than vertical scaling where you have lots or one big one, you
Yeah.
have the horizontal scaling where you have thousands and thousands of them.
Okay. But if you're doing individual, I guess that goes back to like the investors or whatever. If you're doing the individual, I was looking at your pricing plans, and like I say, they seem like the highest price thing you have is like $250.
Mhm.
So, do you think that there's thousands or tens of thousands of individual developers that would be willing to buy this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now there's from the research we did before we started developing this is right
Yeah.
now there's like 13 million individual developers that would be applicable to eventually moving to
Damn.
a thing like this. Now with
Really?
containers it's so new that
Yeah.
it's still just starting and I don't expect that it'll be I mean it's starting and it's starting in a huge way like there was a conference yesterday. I don't remember the name of it,
Yeah.
but the CEO, or not the CEO, but the founder of Docker was there, and Docker Hub had reached 6 billion pulls of images in like 2.5 years. So
Really?
like it is exploding,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I mean, in Google,
Yeah.
regardless of Google's compute engine, Google has recently said that for their internal stuff, for processing Gmail and things like that, they
Yeah.
start up about 2.5 billion containers a week.
Damn.
Um,
Damn. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean that's the big thing about containers too is they're very ephemeral. And
Yeah.
so one of the companies that is actually looking at Cycle, rather than you have virtual machines where the whole kind of, I mean, some people do virtual machines a little bit more efficiently, but
Yeah.
many people just have virtual machines that they sit there and they wait for work because it takes such a decent time to start up some of these virtual machines.
Yeah.
So since containers start so incredibly fast, uh, this company that has been looking into the Cycle they're thinking about every time someone opens they do video encoding. I don't want to go into more detail than that, but they do video encoding. And so
Yeah.
the mentality would be that every time someone would start a new stream of, a new video stream, they'd immediately start a container. And when they stop that stream, the container goes away. And
Wow.
because
Okay.
you can start and stop a container in less than half a second,
Yeah.
you don't have any resources that you're sitting around paying for that you don't need.
Huh.
It's just super fast. And
That's
actually, uh, going off on kind of a weird tangent
yeah.
is when we were at DockerCon, there's someone there that had done this like really absurd demo. Like you should never do it, but just to prove the concept,
Yeah. Yeah.
they had set up Nginx. I believe it was Nginx, but they'd set up some HTTP daemon that every single time a request would come in, it would start a container, serve the request, and then kill the container.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
like I mean
Yeah.
that's absurd, but it just shows like it's a different way of doing things where
Yeah.
you don't have resources just sitting there waiting for work.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
just literally will start the resources as you need them.
Huh.
So it's like VMs on steroids.
That's interesting. So then, with this, I mean, since you're using Docker, Docker is open source, right?
Yes,
And Run C is open source.
yes.
So then, like again, one of the big questions then is, do you have any kind of like real IP? Like if AWS just goes, "Hey, that guy has a good idea," could they just basically spin up what you have and kind of just crush you, or is there something? Is there something that you actually own that keeps that from happening?
So a lot of the IP we have is focused around like just how we implemented the production features of
Okay.
how we manage our DNS internally and kind of the private networks between environments and things like that.
Okay.
I can't go into more details than that, but yeah.
Yeah. So you have something that might
Yeah, so it's not yeah, so the IP is not starting or stopping the containers, but it's
yeah.
all the features that are provided around the containers.
Okay. All right, cool. So then let's get a little into the other, I guess I would say the weeds or whatever. So you're in Toledo, Ohio.
Correct.
So one of the reasons you're like one of the first people I'm doing a Skype interview with, because I got your little PR blast and I was thinking about doing interviews, and then I look and it's Toledo, Ohio, and I was just like, yeah, I'm never gonna get to Toledo. Because I was like, well, maybe it's Cleveland or maybe it's Pittsburgh. I looked to Toledo. No, I'm never going to Toledo. So, and especially like containers as a startup. Like if you're a web hosting company, I guess I'd understand Toledo. But like, how and why do you start in Toledo, Ohio, of all places? I mean,
Really, I mean, we're in Toledo because that's where I was born.
okay, yeah, yeah,
And I mean, we're getting ready to move the company more westwardly,
hmm,
Reno, Nevada to be specific.
okay,
But yeah, just at the moment, it's just this is where I grew up, and I wasn't going to let or that the fact that I lived here stop me from creating a company.
Yeah.
Even when I worked at Single Hop, like even though they were headquartered in Chicago, and I flew there for the first week of every month.
Okay.
There was family reasons at the time that
Yeah.
I had to stay here, but yeah, I wasn't going to let Toledo stop me.
Oh, really? Okay. So you just start it there.
Yep,
So then, okay. So you're not staying in Toledo though.
that is correct.
Okay. So what are your reasons? I mean, if you can, because how many employees do you have now?
6.
So you have six. So if you can get it up to six, I mean, why not stay in Toledo? Why not try to stay there?
Okay, so we have 6 employees, but we've already had to start hiring people remotely.
Okay. Yeah.
Honestly, the biggest thing is like even though Toledo's a great city for many companies,
Yeah.
just the tech culture here, and even I mean it's been growing recently, but for how low level cycle is and the technologies that we're going to, we just need more of that tech talent,
Okay.
and the obvious choices moving towards the West Coast. Um,
So, but then obvious choice is West Coast. But Reno is not what I would think of the obvious choice. So like Toledo to Reno seems like an odd one to me. Like why to Reno?
Yeah, so a lot of companies are moving to Reno right now. Tesla is opening
Hmm.
their Gigafactory there. Switch is moving a lot of their operations to there. I believe even Rackspace is opening a data center in Reno right now. But the
Okay.
big thing is that it's only a 3-hour drive from the Bay Area,
Yeah.
but with a quarter of the living costs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the fact that Nevada has no state income tax, so that allows us
Yeah.
to take that money and hire more people, right?
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
uh,
So did you look at Las Vegas at all? Because I heard Las Vegas, that's where the big startup stuff is supposed to be. Did you look at Las Vegas or?
did briefly.
Yeah.
Issue too hot.
Too high. Okay.
Like, yeah, too hot. I mean, that's a weird thing. Like most people, when we tell them Reno, they're like, "Oh, Reno's just a suburb of Las Vegas,"
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
realize you could fit the entire state of Ohio between Reno and Las Vegas. Like it's an 8.5-hour drive.
Really? Oh wow.
Um,
Wow. Wow. Okay.
and
Yeah.
so like we were like Reno's literally like right on the border of California.
Oh, okay.
And so it just made a lot more sense. And the city's growing at a really fast rate. Like they expect 52,000 new jobs by 2021.
Wow. Okay.
And the city has done quite a bit to help get us out there.
Really?
They've been incredibly helpful. Like the whole I think tagline or motto
Yeah.
for Reno is the biggest little city in the world,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I've
it's
heard
super true. Like even though it's
that.
growing now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's been growing for like a decade now. And like one of the big issues with Reno was they had the huge gambling image that they've been trying to shake, and that's
Yeah.
starting to really happen now.
Hmm.
People that have been visiting there, like of course you still have little bits of downtown that are hardcore gambling, but
Yeah.
um, just there are a lot of other companies moving there. I believe from the people that we've been talking to
Yeah.
out there, they're economic development people. They've had four additional companies choose to relocate to Reno in the last 3 weeks. So I mean, they're getting some really good growth, and that's one of the other things. Like we want to get into a city before they are at that point where we can make a name for ourselves.
Oh, okay. So then, can you say like what benefits did they give you to move out? Like what are the kind of things?
Really, just being able to connect us with anyone that we need. So
Okay.
like looking for office space, they sent us a huge list of people that were involved in real estate that had office space that would be really beneficial to us. And even the people that were doing this real estate, they're like, oh yeah, you guys are a startup. We're helping. Like everyone there seems to want to help get that community bigger.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
even the real estate people we've been talking to that own some of these office spaces, like you're a tech company, you're relocating. We have no problem, helping to offset the cost of moving by lower rent for a couple of months, things like that, and just incredible.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that was really impressive is when we were out there in June,
Yeah.
making sure that it was the right choice. We had a tour of Reno with one of their economic development people, and of course it was biased, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
one of the really interesting things was we walked into this coffee shop, and it was a Thursday when we were there, but the this economic development person says, yeah, so here's this coffee shop. If you ever want to meet our mayor, she comes down here every Friday morning, and you can just walk in and talk to her. That's how she gets involved with all the startups. I was like, that's
Right.
absurd. Like,
Yeah.
um, and so, I mean, I don't know if that's fully true, but
Yeah.
there's enough other people in the coffee shop that were in the tech world that it made sense.
Yeah.
Like,
Huh.
um,
Wow. That's cool.
Just, I
That's
mean, even little things like that were just, pretty exciting.
yeah, cool. So then, so you're in Toledo, but I was taking a look at Crunchbase, and you actually have gotten a little bit of investment money. So how did you get investment money in Toledo, of all places?
Um, honestly, it's one of those weird things where like the Midwest investing is just starting to really kind of grow. Right
Yeah.
now we're halfway through our second round,
Okay.
and so still in the process of completing that. But with that's the weird thing is just with versus the Bay Area
Hmm.
versus the Midwest, there's so much less noise that it's much easier to get a hold of the people that you want to and really sit down and have the meetings that you need to and
Yeah.
just to make those things happen. And I know like I'm like playing both sides like there is some really good benefits in Toledo, and
Yeah.
there really are.
Yeah.
I mean honestly at the end of the biggest thing that is causing us to move is talent.
Talent.
Um, but in terms of like the investors here,
Yeah.
they've been great. Like oddly connected for Midwest. Like you wouldn't think about it,
Yeah.
but it's weird just how well connected many of these people are.
Oh, that's cool. So then, so can I ask, like, how much is your next round that you're trying to get?
So the next round, or the round that we're currently trying
Uh-huh.
to close, is 400 grand.
Okay.
We're doing it in two parts. The first part, or two tranches rather.
Yeah.
The first tranche is 200 grand at 4 mil, and then we're going to wait a few months. Once now that we've launched, be able to show growth, be able to show traction, things like that,
Yeah.
and then do our second tranche for another $250,000 at 6 mil. I think
So
I just said 400, but I mean 450.
yeah, all right, forfeit. But then is that just Midwestern? That seems like chump change right there. Like every time I talk to any startup, they want $1 million to do God knows what. And so if I'm looking at a container as a service company, it seems like in order to scale, you need a crap ton of money. I mean, between infrastructure and coders that actually know what the hell they're doing. I mean, you can't screw up your code. So why would you be going for so late? Because that's 200. So I mean, that's 650 to like spin up what you're doing. That seems like just incredibly low.
Yeah, so one of the big things is, I mean, what one in Toledo living costs are crazy. Our first round funded the company for, of course it was during development, but it
Yeah.
funded the company for 8 months,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
or sorry, 9 months. And so money here does go pretty quite a bit further.
Yeah.
And it will, and now that we're growing, it will require more. But one of the things that we talk about with the board directors and our investors is just the fact that as long as we're able to really prove this traction,
Yeah.
um, and along with the fact that we automate so much that we keep our costs super low,
Yeah.
and the other partnerships and things that allow us to have costs that even really low. But we figured that initially we're going to do more smaller rounds so that by the time we need to do a Series A, like I have an issue where I think a lot of people go out and raise too much money too quickly
Yeah.
to where they end up not being able to justify it and they end up having some really hard times with a lot of their investors or it just puts so much risk on everyone that it ends up in a super stressful situation where people now, rather than worrying about the quality of the product,
Yeah.
they're worrying about literally just revenue. I mean, and revenue is important, of course, but
Yeah.
and we're getting to that point now. But uh, by doing smaller rounds and just more of them, it's
Yeah.
allowed me to kind of grow at a point or at a pace where it's still fast, but a little bit more of an emphasis on quality. Quality is incredibly important to me.
All right. So,
Um,
so is that with that viewpoint? Since because how old are you? Can I ask?
yeah, 25.
You're 25. Okay. I don't know. I can't tell anybody's age anymore. Okay. So, like with that viewpoint, because everybody has their own strategy. Like I say, you talk
Yep.
to any startup founder and they have a by God, this is the strategy, right?
Mhm.
So I guess I'm just curious with that because it sounds like a good strategy. But is that you've seen a dozen different ways to do it and you think it's the best way, or just with your experience, this is kind of like your gut feeling is the best way?
Kind of both, I guess. But
Okay.
I guess this would be more of my gut. But
Yeah.
also the fact that like the investors that we have involved right now, one of them is from Uber. One of them is the CEO of I can't tell what company right now, but there's a lot of business knowledge
Yeah.
that has been there, and it's just one of those. It's different, right?
Okay.
But it's one of those things that it just feels right. Now the goal is to do a Series A next year. where
Okay.
we start talking about $1 million plus.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
but that'll be probably mid summer 2017
Okay.
is our goal for that.
And then for like a company like yours with the coding, like how much do you budget for coders? Like how much do you figure you have to pay them? Ish.
Right now, development is like 75% of our budget.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And then infrastructure is the other is 10%, and then the rest is just other people that support things like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. And then so the big thing that nobody ever talks about with startups is what is then your client acquisition strategy? Because again, so let's say you have a good, let's say you have a good product and you obviously have a good price point and it makes sense. But then a lot of people don't think about actually telling the world that you exist can be a little harder and a little more expensive than people think.
Mhm.
So what's your client acquisition strategy? How are you going to tell the world you're here?
So honestly, this is the I have a lot of tech knowledge.
Okay.
Marketing knowledge is the thing that is new to me,
Okay.
and thus this current call or this interview.
Yeah.
We figure that from the research we've done, we know that most developers have ad blockers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
we're,
never
we're
thought about that, but that the developers. Oh, that's brutal. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we know we don't want to dump too much money into traditional advertising, or not even traditional, but even online advertising, because the people who we're targeting are not ever going to see it. It's going to be the clients that I mean, we want clients, but it's going to be
Yeah.
the people that aren't in our target market that are going to see those. Not
Yeah.
that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's not the people that we are necessarily going after. So we figure that the best way is to kind of have that organic growth via sponsoring meetup groups, sponsoring hackathons, and doing these interviewers with influencers like yourself.
Okay.
And so this weekend we're actually sponsoring MHacks,
Hmm.
which is I believe the second largest college hackathon in the country.
Oh,
And
okay.
then when we're out in Reno in Nevada,
Yeah.
or sorry, not when we're out in Reno in November,
No.
uh,
Okay.
we there's a chance that we may also sponsor CaaS while we're out there, and so that's at UC Berkeley, and really it'll be just to see how that goes, right?
Yeah.
It's one of these things where like containers themselves, it's a new technology, so it's going to have a little bit of hesitation before people switch to it.
Yeah.
And we need to be aware of that, and we also just because of the nature of a platform life cycle,
Yeah.
um, people even if they create accounts, they might not have an immediate use for it. So that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that one marketing method is bad.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I guess internally we've kind of figured that once most people hear about cycle, I mean
Yeah.
we'll try and continue to reach out to them, but we expect that. I mean, of course, some people ideally would sign up immediately and start using it immediately, but most of these people will probably use it at a later point, probably
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 months later.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and so right now, it's in terms of what is our strategy, it's try everything, and
Try
then as we
everything.
start getting more data,
Yeah.
figuring out what we want to do from that point. But given that we only launched last month, um, it's we don't have enough data yet to fully
Yeah.
just make a decision on what's the best way or the best two ways.
So have you brought in a marketing person then, or do you plan to bring in someone shortly?
Next hire,
Next hire. Okay.
next
Okay. Yeah.
hire.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so right now we're trying to find the right person.
Yeah.
So if you have any people that, or any ideas of people that have uh, knowledge of marketing specifically to developers,
Yeah. Okay.
or if anyone watching, we are definitely we want your resume.
All right. Okay.
um,
So then when are you moving to Reno then?
our goal is January.
So you'll be moving it. So is there any weirdness with that? Like when you set up your corporation, like is there? Because I actually now that I think about it, I don't know anybody that's moved states when they have a startup. Like, is there anything weird that you found with that process?
Thus far,
This far,
no.
this far.
Uh,
Talk to me in 4 months. Okay,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. I
yeah.
mean, we've already started to hire people in Reno, so we
Hmm.
have registered the company out there and things like that.
Yeah.
But it'll be a fun legal game when we have to or move the corporation and
Well, do you have
yeah.
do you have to move the corporation, or did you make it a Delaware corp?
We registered in Ohio at the time.
Oh,
I mean, probably going back, it probably would have been better to register in Delaware.
yeah.
But we did in Ohio because, I mean, honestly, Petrichor Inc. was registered in Delaware. So we're like, what should we do? Okay, we'll just do Ohio because it's similar enough.
Huh, okay, yeah,
Like there wasn't anything that was bad. But I mean, if we move it to Reno, I don't, sorry, to Nevada,
yeah,
I don't know if we do.
yeah, okay,
We might. I don't know what the legalities are involving the income tax.
yeah, okay,
Because, given that, if I don't know if we, I don't know, that's for our lawyers and our accountants to figure out. But
yeah.
whichever allows us to get that income tax benefit again, because it's just more money to the company that we can hire more people and
Yeah, okay, that's cool. And then so we talked about it a little bit then. So what is your hit? So you're only 25.
correct.
That's weird. Like I say, I look at you and I'm like, really? Yeah, okay, I don't know. So you're 25. So then, and you've actually been working, at least by Crunchbase, it says you've been working on this since like 2013. Is that right?
Correct. And so I guess when I was 18,
Yeah.
I was in high school, and Single Hop had reached out to me, asked if I wanted a job. At the time, I said no because I wanted to try my own thing. And
Huh.
about half a year out of high school, I was like, okay, maybe it'd be better to get that experience. So I messaged the guys over at Single Hop, and they only had 41 employees, or sorry, they only had 40 employees at that point,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
was crazy. And so anyway, so I worked there. I signed a 2-year contract because I knew that, my goal is I had always had the entrepreneurial spirit. So I
Yeah.
knew that I wanted to create a company. So I didn't want to join a company, then suddenly leave on them. I wanted them to know ahead of time, like, hey, I'll put everything I have into your thing,
Yeah.
but know that I'm going to be leaving at some point. So I signed a 2-year contract. And so after that 2 years, I left to start Petrichor.
Mhm.
And so I started it, and the first product we had created was still called Cycle, but it was kind of like a competitor to Squarespace,
Okay. Yeah.
but more targeted towards businesses
Okay.
rather than individuals and things like that, rather than stores. I guess is Squarespace's big target.
Yeah.
Um, and so the big thing about that was that it allowed these people to build kind of more dynamic websites rather than just okay, click and drag stuff. It had that, but you could also connect it into data feeds and then tell it how you wanted to display that data, so that businesses could build without knowing too much code, could build these fully live sites, and then it had a built-in CDN, and
Yeah.
it just took care of a lot of that. But um, given almost every startup goes through a pivot,
Yeah.
we got started to get users with it. We started to get revenue. It was
Okay.
going well, and then we just decided, honestly, I don't want to spend my life trying to convince other companies to rebuild their websites.
Okay. Yeah.
That was really it. And so at that point, we decided, okay, let's do a pivot. So we threw all that away. Um, we phased out those clients over a year,
Hmm.
and we started building Cycle as it is today. Because the goal all along has been to build a platform. Because I've had a deep love for infrastructure,
Yeah.
for the single hop. Just I love infrastructure,
Okay.
and so just being able to build a platform that people could build anything else on top of. That's the big goal for me. Like I can't wait until cycles continue to go to the point where we have other companies
Yeah.
that have built their entire product on top of Cycle, and that's the goal for me. Um,
So
and
then what gives you that confidence? I mean, like I say, so 22, 23, like what gives you the confidence to create something like this?
uh, honestly, like a lot of people have imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
and I don't know why I don't. Like it's some flaw in my personality where I think if it's just anything that is like appealing enough,
Yeah.
I guess it just really comes down to determination.
Hmm.
I mean, everyone at Petrichor, we work 13-hour days, and we've done that for 3 years now.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
well, sorry, I guess since so the weird thing is, stepping back half a year, it was only 2 people. So
Hmm.
we've added 4 people in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me and our CTO, we've been working 13-hour days for a long time. But anyway, I think that it just kind of comes down to the determination. Like,
Yeah.
um, I don't know, I don't know why I don't have imposter syndrome, but
Yeah.
just try as hard as I can and see what that gets me. And if it doesn't work, tweak it and try again.
That's cool. So then with the single hop though, you say, I mean, you're 18 years old and they just randomly offer you a job. How did that come about?
Yeah, because I was actually buying servers from them when I was 15.
Really?
And
Yeah.
so and so they had known about me ahead of time. And I went out there and I toured one of their data centers when I was 16, I think. And so they had offered me the job 4 times before I accepted it.
Really?
Like I was
Wow.
still a junior in high school the first time they offered me the job. And
That works.
but I mean, I guess maybe that's where some of the confidence came from. Is when I
Yeah.
was there, I built a portal that had 28,000 users using it, and they were managing 17,000 physical servers in 3 different data centers around the globe. And I was doing that when I was like at that time 19. So just one of
Really?
those things like
Yeah.
it was super scary at first. Like crap, I'm gonna mess something up, and I'm gonna cost people a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then when at the end of the day you just code, you just do what you have to do, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I can do this. This isn't an issue whatsoever.
Huh. But you're self-learned. You learned all
Mhm.
this yourself.
Yeah, I've never taken a class for it.
Really? Just trucked along. So then I guess that's a final question then. Is so as you're growing, so then you're a coder, you've done all this coding, you've been doing the coding.
Hmm.
How is it feeling to be boss? Because that's one thing like nobody think like they think about like CEO and they're like I will be top coder, and then it's like here's a human resources issue and here's the marketing request and oh we need toilet paper and you're like what? But but I thought I was gonna be the man and you are buy some more toilet paper. Like how's that going for you?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to get a little adjusted to.
Yeah,
Where coding used to be 95% of my time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now at this point, it's dropped down to 50.
Yeah, well, so good.
I've told our investors that no matter how big the company is, coding is the thing that I love.
Okay.
So I'd always like to at least spend a quarter of my time in code.
Do you think that's real? I mean, yeah, I know Mark Zuckerberg, WizKid, still does that. Do you think that's reasonable? I mean, people say stuff like that, but I mean, like 2, 3 years down the line, do you really think that's reasonable?
I mean, I'll try as hard as I can. When it
Yeah.
becomes unreasonable, I won't do it that way anymore. But
Uh,
you know, it's what I love.
yeah. Okay.
And so no reason to not do it. I mean, it just means that I have to hire rock stars to surround the management team with,
Yeah.
and then make sure that I can trust them and delegate to them so that they can. Of course, it's still organizing strategy, but
Yeah.
in terms of execution, being able to depend on like a CMO to help really execute with that marketing plan. And I guess that's one of the ways that I do run the business is I give people a lot of trust. I don't
Yeah.
like to. I mean, I'll do micromanaging at
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
because I want people to know where my level of standards are. But once they get adjusted to that, as long as people are continue to execute, um, I trust them. I don't want some people that feel like they have to ask anytime they. I don't want people to feel like they have to ask for permission to do everything.
That's good.
Um, like learned helplessness is a huge issue, and I don't like
Yeah.
that.
All right. But then, so if you're CEO and you really want to code, like why didn't you take the CTO position?
Because at the end of the day, it's just one of those things where I want to be able to impact, the strategy of the company. I want to be able to impact the future of the company.
Okay.
And I mean, of course, with the way Petrichor was set up as the holding company,
Yeah.
um, there will be a point where we hire a CEO of Cycle.
Okay. You know that. Okay. Cool. Cool.
And that's how I kind of plan that, right? So
Yeah.
that way I'm still determining direction because it's CEO of Fedcore, but then it's able to jump around between different things, and then hiring people that are CEO of Cycle and CEO of any other company that we end up starting
Oh,
or
I
that.
see. I see. So since they're different companies, so you still stay as CEO, but you give a little. Oh, that's an interesting idea then. Okay.
But that way that person doesn't have to code at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as Cycle's still growing, I'm able to still stay in dev, and I mean there's always going to be those little projects that I'll be able to assist with and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, for the foreseeable future, I'll be spending, a decent amount of time in code. Definitely not as much as it was before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, it's just a startup world, I guess.
So with what you're doing, I mean, are you planning to try to get this to the IPO level? Or are you planning to get this to the sell out to Google for a stupid amount of money level?
To be determined.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's one of those things that I'd like to grow it and keep ownership of it.
Yeah.
But of course, if someone comes along with the right number, everyone has a number. They really do.
Yeah.
Because I know that, given my entrepreneurial spirit, that would just be, okay, I'm just going to take that money and start another company.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Cool. So good deal. So it was a good interview. Is there any final parting words you want the viewers at home to know about?
So if any of your viewers want to try Cycle,
Yeah.
they can go to cycle.io and click sign up and use
Okay.
the promo code Eli the Computer Guy. And the first 100 users that use that will get a $100 credit.
Oh, really? Cool. Cool. That's very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on the show, and
Thanks for having me.
yeah, hope to interview you again in a year or so and see how everything's gone.
That would be great.
Cool. Okay. See ya.
Thanks, Eli.